There we are. uh, it's been a while since I've gone live or even uploaded a video. That is because for the last few days or like the last few weeks, months even, I've been going through quite a bit, and to a it came to a brink a little while ago. But I feel like this can be best described by me introducing you to a character. Jack Aristides is a let me start over. Jack Aristides is a trans woman who uh, discovered their. Okay, rewind. Jack Aristides is a trans woman who has the ability to shapeshift within like human biology. Like she can't grow wings, she can't have a tentacle for an arm, But her magic is unstable due to the fact that to awaken her magic, she got struck by lightning. That lightning has permanently damaged her body and has made it to where her magic is unstable, which causes her body to react to high stress situations. But since her transfiguration powers work off of things that she knows, currently a lot of those trauma responses are like changing or like shifting back into her old self or her father or even I think those are the only two trauma responses right now. But like, and the two wait no, and then like she also gets like progressively younger as well. But like not in a weird way. Like she would change, she would shift to her old self, which is 21-year-old man, and then go backwards in age to like the point of being a 5-year-old child because she is in that mindset where her mental state was just broken, she and as a protective, like as a defensive type thing, her mind blocked out a lot of stuff which caused her to regress physically. Anyways, that you could figure you'll be able to read someday, but the important thing is that Jack, my self-insert character, is trans, and that is because over the last 3 months or so, could be 4 or 5, I have come to accept that I am non-binary and specifically feminine presenting, or want to be feminine presenting. Not there yet. Not there yet. Only day 3 of this, but yeah. While writing this, it's helped me process my thoughts regarding the matter, and I felt truly happy for the first time in a long time. And yeah, but today we're going to be working on uh, finishing out chapter one of Act One, draft number two, because we've got to get this story going like properly. So quickly, I'm going to uh, get rid of that. Chapter one, but because they are hard, I want to explain the context to this title here. So we're going to scroll down and did I skip over the JFK bit? Anderson. Nope. Okay. So, all right, let's just start here. All right. So, a bit into first paragraph, Jack has gone through the initial shock of waking up in a woman's body, has experienced emotions of comfort, of happiness, of uh, of acceptance. Well, not acceptance yet, but well, yeah, acceptance at this point. 'Cause, for the first time ever, I didn't know what I'm sense of being a man. I was just like, yeah, acceptance has been reached at this point, and uh, she has just fully embraced her femininity after years of suppression. So let's get into it. I picked myself off the floor, grabbed a towel, and wrapped it around myself. I looked through my clothes and picked out some underwear, sweats, a large t-shirt, and a sweater. After putting it all on, I went back into the bathroom and tried my best to style my hair for the first time ever, but while I did so, it started to change length. I stopped and thought of the first noticeable change. Okay, editing time, because it like skipped the thought process. Alright, this is when she realizes that she has like control over it and that it's not just a one time thing. Alright, and alright, I stopped and looked closer, and it definitely got longer. I took a deep breath and thought of the first noticeable change I could think of, and my stupid male centered brain thought of larger boobs. Before I could change my mind, I felt my chest get a bit heavier. Pulled up my sweater and shirt, and yep, they were definitely larger. My body listened to me, even if I was still stupid. Said stupid brain shot for the stars immediately, shot for the stars, and thought of John F. Kennedy. So this is gonna be a reoccurring bit where, cause like, all right, out of character now. We are back into author space. So JFK, uh, me personally, from what I know about JFK, he was a very, at the time, progressive president. Helped out, like, he passed a lot of legislation that helped out with the civil rights movement. and also but also was just an a true figure of the American identity. And even though he like every president has his slip ups, his was the Bay of Pigs and pretty much all the war stuff. Really, I can't think of any like legislative stuff that was harmful off the top of my head, but yeah, JFK, and of course JFK had a really unique voice, so he has like very much like stood out in American culture to the point where he was featured in a show called Clone High. But but also when I was writing it initially, I thought if I could change it to any person, who would I go for? And then JFK was the person that popped up in my head. That's what I mean by Jack and I are the same person because I'm very much going at it of what I would do in this situation. Because I've thought about it quite a bit. I've never shared it before because, ugh, farm town, Modesto, California. Certainly thought about, like, the button test where it's like, oh, if you could just swap your body to the opposite sex, would you do it? And, like, my thought was, oh, yeah. And, like, until I really sat down and thought about it, it, like, really clicked in and, like, said thought process is put into the story here, where, um, and attractive, like, even though, like, being attractive doesn't matter, because, airways, but, it still, like, refilled her self-confidence because uh character Jack, like Jack, um whenever I say Jack I mean character, not me, because I am person with actual name off of the internet, but but character Jack's main insecurity about their old body was just how lanky it was, and how it was like pencil thin. And you might be like, "Oh, how is it realistic that she was a baseball player then?" And the answer is, have you heard of Tim Lincecum? Like driving home today, I just straight up thought of like, yeah, yeah, no, like, why did I choose to make Jack's like old body like super lanky, and then I realized that like, oh my god, I subconsciously thought of big time Timmy Jim, like uh, but yeah, but also like I thought of people in my actual life that grew up to like still played sports but like were still like super lanky and stuff, and like I just thought of like the general like young adult man. And it's like lanky, like a lot of men are focused on building muscle, and like for me I just want to like lose weight and then it'd be a lot more. God, anyways, back to who JFK, the name of the first real quick so we all could know. Also, refreshing for the Purge event, still stage 2 citizen, baby. Alright, Brutal Bastion, I don't need this open anymore. So yeah, YouTube. Turn on desktop audio so it doesn't have a thumbnail. Monkey Kid. It's actually gonna be my first experience watching it too. Oh, all right. What's that video titled? Okay, I'll just look up good shorts later. Alright, so JFK, moon speech. We choose to go to the moon. Yeah, it's a long one. I think there's, yeah, this one's more precise with it.
We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases,
This right here is the first person Jack thought of to test out.
no man can fully grasp how far and how fast we have come. But condense, if you will, stated in these terms, we know very little about the first 40 years, except at the end of them, advanced man had learned to use the skins of animals to cover them. Then about 10 years ago, under this standard, man emerged from his caves to construct other kinds of shelter. Only 5 years ago, man learned to write and use a cart with wheels. Christianity began less than 2 years ago. The printing press came this year. And then less than 2 months ago, during this whole 50-year span, last month, electric lights and telephones and automobiles and airplanes became available. Only last week did we develop penicillin and television and nuclear power. This is a breathtaking pace, and such a pace cannot help but create new ills as it dispels old. So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are a little longer, to rest, to wait. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. We shall send to the moon 240,000
It's coming.
miles away a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body and then return it safely to Earth. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal?
Here we go. It's coming up. It's coming up right now, I'm pretty sure.
And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. And therefore, as we decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, other things, not because the other things. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal.
But because they are hard. The perseverance of mankind to always innovate and create and keep pushing no matter what. That right there is going to be a central theme of Jack's character, because Jack is she's going to keep pushing despite all the trials that are put before her. She's going to keep pushing. She's not going to give up. She's going to keep trying to live, to earn her own life, to be able to live peacefully, because by the end of the first book here, trying to escape Robert, she gains the attention of Lucius Valor, a man who is so focused and persistent with his choices that if he chooses to go after you, one of you are going to end up dead. And he's been around for the past 2,000 years. Anyways, back to the reading bit here. Before I knew it, I felt and saw my body changing from the body of my dreams to the 35th president of the 35th president of the United States of America. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my chest, and released it. I thought of something to say, and then found it. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Glorious JFK impersonation. I know. I'm gonna try to stop on and off just in case I brush my ear and the music starts playing. I don't want this stream to get copyrighted. I laughed in amazement. For the first time, I actually believed those words. Here I was able to face myself head on, and I loved her. I felt my body get smaller, and I found myself looking back at her. I smiled, and so did she. I waved, and so did she. I walked up to the mirror and said, I am you, and so did she. I spent the day trying out new things until I decided to use it for revenge. I thought of that prick pitcher, Anderson. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, but when I opened my eyes, it was all gone. I was back in my old body, the one I left behind. I started to breathe heavily. For the first time in 21 years, I truly wanted to get out of my own skin. I clenched my eyes shut, but I just felt the blood drip down from my forehead, down my face. I screamed for my body to take me back, but I was just met with an even worsening emotional state. I took control and opened my eyes, confronting him head on. I thought about her. I thought about me. I thought about how I felt free for the first time, how I felt for myself, how I felt like myself for the first time. I watched as my body changed back into its own, and I broke into tears, tears of joy and relief, but also the fear I felt while back in him. I spent a few hours doing less extreme tests, making sure I didn't get anywhere close to him. I settled on medium build with a bit of weight added on to enunciate my curves, but just enough so that I'd be able to get back into sports someday. I let my hair grow out in a brilliant wavy brunette that reached my shoulders. I gave myself a smile and chuckled. This was me. I looked around my apartment, my gaze settling on my gear bag. I pulled out my bat and tossed it over my shoulder. Perfect. I looked through my things and rearranged until my phone buzzed. And this time on my own, I hadn't even thought of what other people would think. Just yesterday, they saw a young man that stumbled his way through life, and now they'd see a woman that was confident in herself. I had just sculpted myself, assuming that I'd be able to walk onto the field and just claim my spot. But a woman on a boys' baseball team? The whole country would be out to get my head. I started to sink back to my shell, but shook off the feeling. I'd go to James first, and if James accepted me, then I'd be able to take on anything. I looked at my phone but hesitated. James grew up in the same world I did, in the same world where I was supposed to where I suppressed anything that felt even slightly feminine. How would he react if I turned up on his doorstep? I paced back and forth, acting out the various scenarios, but only one thing made sense. I wasn't going to go back, so I'd just have to do it, but on my terms. I took out my phone and texted him. If this was going to happen, I'd still be at home. I waited for hours, completely forgetting that he had to work on Sundays. By the time I remembered his work schedule, the rain outside had elevated into a downpour. I looked around to make sure I had an extra change of clothes, and once I confirmed I did, I went out into the rain. I took a deep breath of petrichor and smiled. I ran around like an idiot and felt free. After a while, I walked down to the store and got myself some new clothes, some that I thought I'd be able to be proud of myself in. While shopping, I saw one of my teammates in line and thought of saying hi, but I stopped myself. For them, it would just be a random woman coming up to them, not their friend of 2 years. I smiled to myself and got in the checkout line when I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around and saw a woman a bit older than me and a kid standing next to her. How'd you get your hair to look like that? I was stunned. Sure, I had styled it to my own liking, but people actually liked how it looked. I smiled and said, genetics. She laughed and said, I wish I was as lucky. She nudged her kid's arm and said, this one might just get the chance though with how good her father looks. I crouched down and said hi, but she just hid behind her mother even more. I stood back up and said goodbye before realizing I'd be waiting in line. Thankfully, it started to move, so I was able to avoid that embarrassment. After getting out to the store, I ducked between the trees and made use of the cover they provided and eventually made my way home. Once inside, I looked through the bag and put on some new clothes I got and pulled out a t-shirt. As I pulled off my sweater and shirt, I realized I hadn't gotten a bra or any new underwear. I sighed as I pulled the shirt over and changed it to a pair of shorts I got. I checked myself in the mirror and once again found myself smiling. I spent the next couple of hours trying out different combinations and even tried styling my hair differently when I heard a knock at the door. I thought to myself that James must have gotten off of work early, so I did a few final touch ups and walked into the living room, but found a man that I'd never seen before standing in my living room. He wore a neat black three-piece suit with a white shirt underneath. His hair was slicked back and his glare pierced the wall he was looking at. He looked at me and I would have thought I was shrieking back if I couldn't literally feel it. He looked up and down and said, are you having a good time, miss? He extended his hand, and between his pointer and middle fingers was a business card. I grabbed it and read it. Robert Rock, Arcane Guardian for Misplaced Users. I looked back at him and asked, what's this? He motioned towards the dirty uniform to the left and said, 3 days ago you were playing in the North Haven Commanders versus Williston Vipers championship game, correct? I nodded. Well, you, ma'am, were struck by lightning during that game. That lightning strike filled up your natural magic to the point where you unconsciously transformed your body into one of your own preferences. I thought back to this morning, and everything he was saying was lining up. He walked closer to me and said, but you don't have total control over it, do you? I felt my body changing and my clothes starting to feel looser as my pencil-thin figure returned. He touched my forehead and licked the blood off his finger. Potent. He took out a device from his pocket and grabbed my hand. I tried to resist, but I couldn't break free of his cold grip. He pricked my finger and watched as the screen on the device flickered, revealing a number 8. He let go and I stumbled back to the wall. He looked at me and said, your magic's unstable, and with such a high reading, you'll be in danger to those around you if you don't refine it. He crouched down and grabbed my uniform before tossing it over to me. Put it on. It's better that you get familiar. He walked towards the door and said, 5 minutes. Then we leave. He opened the door and stepped out, closing it behind him. I looked down at the uniform on the ground before me. Every part of me was screaming at me to just burn it and never have to think about it again. I stood up and walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. In a matter of seconds, he reduced me to this. I couldn't make it out there. I'd be marked as an abomination against nature. I looked at my phone and on the counter and thought about James. I needed him for comfort right now. I unlocked it and quickly texted him, coming over to your place. Wait for me. After the message was sent, I put the phone in my pocket and pulled on every emotion inside of me to get back to normal. Once I knew everything was back to the way it was, I grabbed my bag of clothes, my bat, a few toiletries, and the remaining cash I had left. I walked over to my bedroom and pried open the window, made my way outside, and ran towards James's house. I should have brought a jacket while at the store. I got about a block down before I came to a stop and realized my new clothes were soaked. While I love the rain and its lovely smells and fresh air, I didn't like the fact that my t-shirt was now clinging to my body for dear life. I found a tree to take cover under before I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 3:02 p.m. If I took my time, James would probably be at his house by the time I got there. I tucked my phone back into my pocket and walked down the street calmly to try and not to gain attention from the neighborhood, as if the t-shirt and shorts in the pouring rain wasn't enough of a signal. I found a bus stop and decided to wait under the cover of the stall for a bit to kill some time. Robert was probably already looking for me, so I had to stay in cover as much as possible. After making sure no one was watching, I pulled off my shirt and put on a dry one. While it was a complete waste of dry clothes, I needed to be able to change into something that Robert wouldn't be able to recognize from afar. I continued down for another 2 blocks before getting into James's house. I saw his car in the driveway and immediately ran up to the doorstep and knocked on the door. Coming! James was home. A few minutes later, the lock clicked and the door opened. He looked confused and asked, "Are you looking for someone?" That's right, he wouldn't recognize me. I quickly looked at my phone and said, "Is this 2932 Montgomery Way?" James peeked his head out and looked at the numbers on the front of the house. "Yeah, but I didn't order anything. Sorry." He started to close the door, but I stopped it with my foot and asked, "Could I come inside for a bit? I forgot my jacket at home, and my friend asked me to meet up here." James looked me over and said, "Yeah, sure. Just make sure to not get anything too wet." I thanked him and slipped inside, making sure I got out of view from the outside as quickly as possible. James's house was just like I remembered. He lived here for most of his life, having moved in when I was 5 years old. I spent so many nights here that it felt almost like a second home for me, and now I felt like a stranger to it. I set my bag down on the small table near the front door, and it said, "You're James Prescott, right?" Damn it. He agreed from the kitchen before bringing over a couple cups of hot chocolate. He set them down and said, "It's the only thing I have that's warm if you want any." I nodded and grabbed the cup. I noticed the chip from the rim when he dropped it while we were trying to get it from the top cupboard as kids. "So, who exactly wanted to meet up with you here?" Shit. I figured he'd forget my lame excuse, to be honest. I set down the cup of hot chocolate and said, "I'm sorry, but the real reason I'm here is a bit more personal." I took out my phone and set it on the table. "It's me, Jack." He quickly turned around and said, "Who?" There's no way he'd forget me. "You know, your best friend in the whole world?" He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but I don't know who you're talking about." Picked up the phone and saw the picture of us and Ricky as the background. "Where'd you get Ricky's phone from?" I shook my head and said, "It's mine, not Ricky's." "James, don't you remember?" He looked me over and said, I'm sure I'd remember a girl crazy enough to wear a t-shirt and shorts out in the pouring rain. He then noticed my bat sticking out of the bag and started to back up. Look, I'm just trying to get through college. I don't have anything valuable here. He tossed the phone. He tossed back the phone and pulled out his own out of his pocket. Leave now, before I call the police. I stood up and said, James, do you really not remember me? I felt myself changing again. He picked up a glass and said, Look, I don't know what you are or why you're in my house, but I won't say anything if you just leave right now. I wasn't getting through to him. I had to break up the big shots. Big guns, not big shots. Sorry, I had to get that out of my system. Your sister, Rin, she was kidnapped when you were 9. He shook his head and said, It was all over the news. I nodded and said, But your story wasn't. You tried to get her back from the men, but they just pushed you aside and you hit your head on the curb. That's how you got your scar. He touched his forehead and dropped his phone. After that, you didn't come to school for weeks. When you finally did, you took me aside and told me about it because I was the one person you could trust. He dropped the glass and leaned against the wall. You didn't fail her, James. You did everything that you could do. He looked up at me and said, Please, tell me who you are. I walked over to him, but he stuck his arm out. From there, I stopped and took a deep breath. I'm Jack Aristides. You moved into the neighborhood when you were 5, and we became friends immediately. We did everything together, including baseball. He looked me up and down. You're the kid that got struck by lightning, aren't you? I nodded and said, James, when my dad died, you said you'd be there for me always. I held out my hand and said, I'm the only person you did the handshake with. He looked at my hand and back up at me. He walked up and grabbed my hand, and in perfect sync, we did our handshake together. Jack, what happened? I shrugged and said, Beats me. I woke up like this, and like this morning, I felt my body changing back to normal. He backed up a bit and said, Like that? I nodded. James, I'm trans. This is me. He continued to look at me in shock and laughed. This is really you? I nodded. He walked up and hugged me. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel otherwise. He let go and looked down at his shirt. Did you seriously not think of grabbing a jacket? I remembered Robert. No, I didn't have the time. I looked back at the front door and back at James. My apartment isn't safe right now. Could I stay here for a few days? James smiled and said, Anything you need. Do you have dry clothes? I walked over to my bag and opened it up. Everything had gotten soaked and tripped over. I shook my head and he said, Toss what you got in the dryer and grab one of my shirts and a pair of sweats. I thanked him and started to head up the stairs, but before I could get onto the first step, he said, Thank you for saying what you did about Rin. I turned to face him and said, No problem, and headed upstairs to get dried up. After I put my clothes in the dryer, I walked into the living room and James was looking at my bat. He noticed me and said, To think that the legendary Basher won't get to finish the season. I sat down next to him and nudged his shoulder. You really think I won't be able to play? He nodded and said, I'm sure Coach would let you, but there's no way the school will allow it once the city gets involved. He looked back at me and said, So this is how I finally find out you're chasing a woman, huh? I punched him and said, "Still ace, just boy myself now." He smiled and said, "I know, it's just that you never really talked about this kind of thing before." I grabbed Basher and said, "I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted to fit in with guys so much after Dad died that I rejected anything feminine about myself." James nudged me and said, "I guess the universe decided to give me another sister then." I smiled and hugged him. He hugged back and said, It's nice. It's nice to finally know you for you." I nodded and said, "I've been thinking the same thing for the last 12 hours." James stood up and walked to the kitchen. "So why isn't it safe for you to go home?" I looked up and said, "Some guy broke in and tried to force me into my baseball uniform and kidnap me." He stopped what he was doing and said, "What?" I leaned back against the couch and said, "Yep, I thought it was you coming by, but instead it was this random guy that tasted my blood and got some rating on it. He said that my magic was too unstable or something like that." James walked back into the living room and said, "Okay, that's a lot. What's this about you having magic?" I stood up and turned around in a circle and said, "It's how this happened, and how I can become anyone I could think of." You know, you was right. I needed to be able to shift on command to have true control of it. So I broke out the only one I knew how to do. Before I knew it, I was JFK again, and James's mouth was wide open. He walked over and touched my face. "Oh my God, it's actually real." I laughed and said, "Sure is, you young strapping lad." He went back into the kitchen as I shifted back into myself and said, "I do feel a bit tired after a full body shift, though. It took me a while to even get this right. For the record, you did a great job, Jack. You're beautiful." I blushed and thanked him. So far, I was 2 for 3 on compliments. He brought in some sandwiches and asked, "You hungry?" I nodded and said, "God, yes, I haven't eaten all day." As I tore into the sandwich, James slowly worked on his. He was always polite and neat, making sure to enjoy his meals. I was practically the polar opposite. It was rare that I didn't eat my food as fast as possible so I'd be able to get back to working on whatever project or activity I was doing. After the two of us finished, he said, "Make sure to feel free to make yourself at home in the spare bedroom. If you need anything, just let me know." He picked up the plates and walked into the kitchen. I went back upstairs to get comfortable and get some well-needed rest. I woke up early the next morning and found my clothes folded up and put into open drawers. I looked through them and found a note on the top drawers that I read, "I've got today off. Write down what you need and I'll make a run to the store." I smiled and grabbed a few things before hopping in the shower and cleaning up. After getting dressed, I walked downstairs and smelled breakfast being made. "Sleep well?" James asked from the kitchen. "Yeah, it was honestly the best sleep I've had in years. I've forgotten in weeks." I'd thought back to the note and said, "I could always come with you to the store. That way I could just get what I need and get it done with." James walked in and set a full plate of food on the table. "Oh, that's nonsense. I've got to make a run to the store anyways, so I'll just get what you need." "That's the thing. I'm not sure what I need yet. I've only been like this for a day." James set the keys down on the table and said, "All right, take the time you need. I've got to get my morning jog in anyways." I turned to face him and said, "I'm sorry, I just don't want to take up your time." James turned around and continued to now walk backwards to the front door. To walk, to walk, now backwards to the front door. "You can't do that. I've got all the time in the world for a friend in need." He looked back at me after opening the door. "Just please don't crash the car. I've seen you drive before." I mocked him quietly as he left, but he was right. After washing the dishes, I grabbed the keys and the cash I had and walked out onto the driveway. It was a bright sunny day in stark contrast to the afternoon before, but that was the usual in North Haven during the fall. I got into James's car and started it up. The car hummed to life, but before I could take it out of park, my phone buzzed. Took it out of the pocket and read the message from James. My wallet's in the glove box. Feel free to get anything you need with the car to make sure to shapeshift into me if you get pulled over. And now we're all caught up, 40 minutes in. Alright, I'm actually gonna Jack riding in a while. And even though I've hit a roadblock, I'm gonna take a bit of a break and let myself recharge a bit. I think it's just because I'm tired, to be honest. But yeah, hopefully next time I see you, there's a bit more, and hopefully the chapter's finished.